eventually you get absorbed in and you are Sonic.
OMG, hi! Welcome to another episode of No Repeat. It's a podcast where we pick 3 songs every week with no repeats and no do-overs to fill up your top 3 on your profile. Joining me are my co-hosts and best friends. LOL OMG Random, it's Tyler Reed.
Didn't we used to have internet handles for this? I think I was Sneezy Panda on the MySpace.
And over there, it's Sean Evans.
Oh man, have you guys learned how to Soldier Boy yet? That's the coolest dance in the whole world.
Yeah, I cranked that.
Dude, everyone's cranking that.
Gotta be careful about just talking about cranking it without context.
I'm XX Taylor Olmstead XX.
Uh-huh.
And this week, we're here to help you pick songs for your MySpace profile, right, Tyler?
That's correct.
Tell them all about it.
Did you know that MySpace primarily existed from the years 2005 to approximately the year 2009? Which conveniently happened to converge with the rise of the emo subgenre.
Merriam-Webster defines emo as...
in which we were all youths. Yes.
Tyler, just because this song is about our middle school era doesn't mean it needs to sound like a middle school book report. But if people want to submit their own challenge so that we don't keep talking about the mid-2000s over and over again, where can they do that?
Please send us suggestions. And if you want to submit a challenge, you can DM us, at us, No Repeat Pod, Instagram or Twitter, which didn't exist in the year 2005. Or you can always send us an email, which did exist in the year 2005. NoRepeatPod@gmail.com. Thanks so much.
You turned into Homestar Runner there for a second.
You did.
Wait, who submitted this challenge?
I did. I'm Homestar
Runner.
I had to get into the voice. Sorry.
Yeah. This was a Tyler Reed original for sure. So for the youths, you may not have had a MySpace. You may have only heard about it. But one of the key elements of MySpace was picking a song that would automatically play as soon as anyone went to your profile. This was before the days of auto-playing videos on every website and email subscription pop-ups and do you want these cookies? There was no consent involved. You just opened the page. It took like 4 minutes to load because of a bunch of bad, horrible JavaScript and CSS and like rotating backgrounds and stuff. And then it would start blasting a song at you. Whatever song the MySpace user chose, which always said a lot about you as a person. So the 3 of us became friends in the MySpace era, way back in 2006, 2007. What do you guys remember about the MySpace experience and the pathos of picking a song for your profile?
It actually, I feel like I can recall a lot of things about most of my history are small little like social elements of my life. Like I remember connections but for some reason that entire MySpace era feels so fuzzy. I think because there's no physical archive of it in any way, right? Like it just does not exist. So you can never like kind of go back to it. Like at least with like Facebook, you can kind of see like a relic of its former self if you go back far enough. And it still has some of those elements somewhere throughout the site. So you're kind of like have like a touch point for it. But it was actually really hard to think about the songs that I had chosen for my profile. I mean, I think a lot of the songs I probably would have chosen for this challenge, I think I probably have already put on this playlist. Just because, you know, they would be songs that just are impactful or made a big difference or you know end up being one of my favorites and kind of really stuck with me, and that would make sense to be a song that I would choose for this show. There was one, like for some reason the one that really sticks out of my mind, I specifically made like a vampire themed, like, and I realized we were in the Twilight era, but it was like specifically like Warhammer Fantasy-y, like not Twilight Vampire-y, and I used Dragula as my song for like a little bit, but I was not going to pick Dragula for there's got to be a better use case for that song. But like I feel like a lot of it for me was trying to make like a theme or choose like my space my space sort of like matched the song that I chose. I think I remember that being important to me.
Sean, I don't remember your MySpace very well, other than the photo you had. But what do you remember about that process? What was on your page? Do you recall?
I blogged occasionally. I mostly just changed my song a lot and changed the background. I was just thinking about that, how that used to be such a thing to go and scour the internet and find out little codes to change the outline of your boxes or establish background images, and you could kind of like design it as like a very, very basic web page. And I used to enjoy that a lot, and I just never, but it never occurred to me as something I wanted to do for a living. Like, it was cool to customize it myself and have my own little space, but I don't know. I'm trying to think how I got off of MySpace. I think I just stopped logging on there. It just became uncool as everybody switched over to Facebook, and then it kind of just, I feel like it just went away. And then I found out that it was, something happened and it was just like scrubbed from the internet. And some people were very upset. I was like, wow, that's probably better for the internet, honestly.
Yeah, we don't need to go back to that. We all need to know.
Well, I will be the lone voice that is sad about the eradication of MySpace. And it's not really about MySpace itself, but I'll tell that story in a second. As far as like my profile page and music and everything, I remember looking up like MySpace profile themes, because there were like sites where you could download themes, and like I think you could even buy them in some instances. And I definitely remember doing that, not paying for any, but I remember like finding the cool ones and like always trying to have like the coolest looking page. And I remember like going over to people's houses and loading up their MySpace friends, and we would sit there and make fun of people's pages that we didn't think were good.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you had lots of sparkle text, for example.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah, remember those? But picking the song was always kind of the fun part, I thought. And I remember trying so hard to have a song that was either cool and that everybody liked, or having a song that you thought was cool but nobody else had. Like there was this kind of like race to find the coolest thing that no one else was using. And that's actually how I discovered Arctic Monkeys, because they were one of the first bands to make it big on MySpace. And I think I was like the only person I knew that had one of their songs in my profile for a while. But then there was also like, you would be dating somebody and you'd put them at the top of your top 8, and then you'd both have the same song.
Yeah. The social hierarchy of top 8 and top 12.
Yes, so MySpace, when it originally launched, let you pick your top 8 friends to display on your profile, which was always a horrific experience. And then they let you do 12, and then sometime later they let you just have MySpace randomly put 8 or 12 people in there. But it was always a big thing when people moved around in your top 8. That meant something. That was important. But going back to my reason that I'm upset about the loss of MySpace, it's kind of twofold. The first one is like not that important, which is I do make websites for a living. And so I would love to be able to go back and see like what baby me was doing in bad HTML and CSS. But more importantly, there were a lot of really great photos on there that I lost, including some of my favorite vacation photos where I ended up getting a backstage tour of the Orlando Hard Rock Cafe and got to see the piano that John Lennon wrote Imagine on. And we got pictures with it and everything. And then I put those pictures on MySpace, and shortly thereafter, the family computer died, because this was still back in the days when there was a family computer in a computer room. And we didn't back any of that up, and all those photos, they only existed on MySpace. So when MySpace went down, All of those photos are gone. And if I could save anything, I just want the photos from that trip. I don't need anything else that was on my MySpace. I just want, like, that week we spent in Orlando. But I have scoured every hard drive in my parents' house, and they just do not exist anywhere. It sucks, man.
I kind of forgot that was an element of that as well. I don't remember anything about it. It's wild how much I don't remember. I feel like bulletins?
Yes, bulletins was like the equivalent of statuses. So there was like a bulletin board where you could post and people could comment. It was like a mix between a status and a blog post almost.
And I'm like, did they just have like a space where you could just put your photos? Was that what happened?
Yeah, eventually they added like photo albums. Yeah.
Hold on. I need to look at this. Old MySpace profile. It's even more buck wild than I remember.
I know, right? For those who didn't grow up in the MySpace era, I'll put like a sample profile picture, like screenshot of a profile as the chapter art for this part of the podcast, so you could just see what we were looking at. But it was truly unhinged.
Yeah.
Is it too late to change the theme to your wedding?
To make my wedding MySpace themed?
Well, I mean, no. Could we do your wedding as the Hives?
The Hives were a very MySpace era band. I recently saw the Hives, and they kick ass.
That's what I mean. Like, can like Josiah's side do like the White Stripes, and we can do like the Hives or something?
Boy, aesthetics really were everything at that time.
Oh yeah, that pink one. That was it.
Garish.
Yeah, I feel like I knew this girl.
I mean, that was like how every graphic design just didn't exist.
Yeah, well, it was middle schoolers doing graphic design. Oh my gosh, do you remember you used to be able to customize the interaction box? So it had like message, friend, chat, which was like instant message, create a group. I forget what the other options were. But some people would like insert code into their MySpace profile where they would remove some of the options, so like you couldn't message them.
Yeah.
And that was always like such a power play. Like I can't do justice to the listener to understand, if you weren't there at the time, how much of this site you could just make your own. There was very little that was like permanently fixed in a place.
Well, that's what I mean. Like when I was saying that was the fun part about it, was you could go on there and just rearrange to put your blog on top or towards the bottom, or put a song on there, and it was just like you could find any song too. Like you didn't.
Well, yeah, and that was another
or
part. Like
put the background or put all these little things on there. There was always like source code to do all this stuff, and then I feel like then you went to Facebook and it was like Facebook had it locked down. It was like you had your header picture and that was it.
And Facebook also really wanted you to use your real name, whereas on MySpace everybody was using fake names or aliases or
or handles, all kinds of stuff,
doing the what I talked about at the top of the show, little x big X name, big X little x. I mean, it was what a time to be alive. So what do you remember about picking your MySpace song? Like, did you have a process? Was there something in particular you were looking for?
I was of the school that you talked to earlier, of the finding the song that nobody knew about. I wanted to be like the trendsetter.
I feel like I was a little bit the trendsetter, but it was also kind of like a taste signaling thing, because there was definitely a point where like certain songs or certain CDs, this was also the CD era, it was like right at the end of the CD era and the dawn of the MP3 iPod era, there were songs or albums that were just so important in our like social circles that everybody had to have a song from it on there, or there'd be like a song of the summer. There was also a weird moment where like inside joke songs became a thing.
Yeah.
And we of course took this to the nth degree, where for some reason we decided that the OC was fun to make fun of, and so Sean, Tyler, and our friend Kevin and I took a photo in Tyler's living room and then photoshopped a sunset behind us and made it all of our profile pictures and like changed all the backgrounds to beach scenes and the papyrus font. And we all had California by Phantom Planet, the theme song from the OC, as our song for like a month. I don't even remember why we decided to do that.
It was from that Simpsons bit where they go to
Knott's Berry Farm.
Six Flags or something. Yeah, and Snoopy robs them at gunpoint at an ATM machine.
Yes, yeah. And we thought that was the funniest thing in the world.
I feel like the context of that was it could have been the schism that happened in the friend group.
Well, yeah, MySpace was also really instrumental in a schism that happened in our friend group at the time. Because it was very bad at letting you actually communicate.
Yes.
And very good at establishing and maintaining social hierarchies.
But of course, that also, I think another important thing to remember is this is also during the era in which a lot of people were also still using AAM.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, I feel like Facebook really understood the way to sort of, like, get everybody together was to combine chat with the functions of a social network like MySpace.
Well, I thought that was kind of, like, chat rooms went away, MySpace popped up, and then Facebook came, Twitter kind of popped up.
And that was the end of everything.
And then I feel like it kind of got decentralized.
But I do remember specifically, like, when we had this big drama in our friend group, like, bulletins would go out, like, saying mean things about other people.
Yeah.
And if you weren't friends with the person who wrote the bulletin, you couldn't see it. And so, like, everyone in the school would see something that you couldn't see. It was not a good system. But anyway, I feel like the songs were such a huge part of it, and they're the reason that people remember MySpace more than anything. This is like, it really was a home to that style of music, to that emo, pop punk, electro pop, like, scene. All of that stuff lived on MySpace. I think partially because all of those bands were of the age where being on MySpace was good for their career, and they leveraged it.
Yeah, because that was also a primary function of the website, was like you could look up shows and you could find out about bands, and then like there was definitely a lot of like easy networking you could do. But, you know, I do feel like that was a new discovery tool for a lot of smaller artists, and that was, I don't remember how much of that actually was. I don't remember how much I discovered organically on MySpace. That'd be a good question. I forget how good like the search functionality was.
Oh, I distinctly remember like going to bands I liked, and then their top 8 would be like other bands on the same record label, and I would find stuff that way.
So janky. Yeah, so it's like you would go to a show, and then you'd be like, oh, you can find us on MySpace. You know, I feel like, and then that sort of starts the trail that starts you on down your way to finding more stuff. Or it's like, I still just vaguely remember like web rings during that time, and I feel like that also sort of led into that as well, because that's like, I've already talked about this on the show before, I'll say it again, but it's like how I found like Andrew Jackson Jihad and like Bomb the Music Industry and all these sort of like really like DIY artists, because they just were giving music away for free, that you could just download as MP3s on the internet for, you know, pay what you want model. But I don't know if that necessarily translated into MySpace or not. I feel like that was kind of the in between, though, when I started kind of finding like more like web ring stuff, because I actually really I was digging a lot this week to try to figure out sort of like what I was even listening to at the time, because that was even before I was using Last.fm. Because I think Last.fm was like very early, like 08, 09. I think that was when I first started really using it. But it's like, I probably could have just done the excavation myself if I just went to my parents' house and looked through my thousands of CDs that I just have laying around. And be like, it was probably one of those songs.
Well, Tyler, do you want to go first? What's your song this week?
This week I chose Come On, Feel Strong, Sing Along by A Decade to Die For. So, A Decade to Die For is a local band that we saw at the Mad Hatter, which, rest in peace. I don't recall if this was the particular concert that caused the schism. It was. Okay, well.
It was.
Unfortunate. But...
Wait, what? I don't remember this at all.
The story is that this band was opening for a band that Tyler and I wanted to see.
Was the band. That's... Ooh.
Yeah, I remember Hazel Weatherfield.
Yeah, this band opened for them and ended up being a lot better than them.
By like a lot.
But we, I think we talked...
Pick your openers wisely, kids.
I think we talked Sean into driving us to the show, is how he went. And then other parts of our friend group got very upset that we went to the show without them. And that was the end of that friend group because this was high school. Anyway, Tyler, continue.
Yeah, so this was probably one of the first shows that I went to intentionally of my entire life. And so I definitely feel like when I'm thinking about the spirit, at least the energy of what song I was like looking for and like trying to recall like my mentality, I think I was so enamored by the local artist, the local band, that has some level of clout, that has some level of, like, ooh, look at this cutting edge new thing that we're like listening to, like, yeah, I'm on the hip, cool side of the music spectrum, right? It definitely was like a mentality to be like, how many indie bands can you name? I distinctly remember a questionable individual who tried to like dick measure with me about it. I was like, listen. So that was sort of like the mentality. And so I feel like, I almost certainly at some point had this song as a profile song. I don't know if I specifically recall if I did or not, who's to say, but this is definitely a song in the era during the right time. And it would be something I would definitely choose. Now, is A Decade to Die For a particularly notable pop punk outfit from Cincinnati, Ohio? I feel like what they offer is heart. They offer gang vocals, and they offer a feel-good energy. And, who doesn't like a gang choral vocal to end a song out? There's not necessarily a whole lot to it. But, like, if you're going to go to, like, a local show, especially, like, if it's, like, for, like, a pop-punk band, and you get this, you're, like, pretty good. Like, I feel like everybody's kind of doing a little bit more. Like, there's like a no amount of like a bass drum sort of in the drumming that makes it feel like a little more than just like a 4 on the floor very basic drum pattern. I feel like they're all doing like a little more elevated than what I would typically expect out of like a run of the mill like punk band I would just go see at a show. And so I feel like I feel like it's charismatic enough. I think it's fun enough. I think it's gets me going. I don't think it's too much, but I feel like at the time it was like. It was gold. It was this is an unknown artist. Wow.
Yeah, I just remember being completely bowled over by this band. I remember us going over to the merch table afterwards and talking to them for like a half hour and just being like so impressed because like Tyler said, they had great stage presence and they all were doing something. They were all having a good time. Listening back to it now, two things stand out to me. I think first of all, this is a remarkably well-crafted song for as small as this band was. Like, I'm kind of surprised that this band didn't get bigger than this. This was their debut EP, then they did one full length, and that was it. And I think if they kept going, they might have gotten onto like a Fueled by Ramen or something. Because there's a lot of technical skill here. And the songwriting is basic, but it's arranged well, which is more than you could say for a lot of pop punk. And I think part of it too, then like the sentimental part of it is like, yeah, this is exactly what we were listening to at the time. We liked the emo scene, we liked punk, but we wanted it to be, we were musicians, we were all in marching band. We thought of ourselves as being somewhat more artsy than the traditional, like, punk kids at our school, so to speak. And so we were looking for this more technical stuff. Like the technical drumming on here would be in line with the kind of stuff we were listening to at the time of like, I mean, I talk about Mars Volta all the time, but you could also talk about Tool. You could talk about Circa Survive.
Yeah, you could talk about Tool.
Perfect Circle. We were into that nerdier kind of rock music, and I think this is like just in the sweet spot of like MySpace era emo, but technical enough for the nerds. It holds up. I listen to this song probably every 6 months.
I can't speak for the technicality of my music. I can say that there was like no punk contention at our school besides maybe like Greg and I for a long time. There was like the emo kids and the metal kids, and they didn't get along. And there was, I don't know, there was maybe like everybody else in between there. But yeah, I didn't know they were from Cincinnati. Maybe I had wiped this from my memory or something along those lines.
It was such a traumatic experience.
Yeah, I guess. I just had to, I've numbed it out. It's an interesting band. I think that when I listened to this again for the first time, I was like, I know this band. I thought they were more popular than they were. I was like, I've heard you guys talk about this band all the time, so I just assumed that they were, a lot of people knew about them. And
No.
Nope. You could walk by one of these guys in your office today and never know that they made it to the big time. So yeah, this has like all the classic emo vibes. I think I love the second chorus where there's just somebody holding a note the whole time, at least for like the first half. And then the gang vocals, and just there's no dynamics at all. It's just loud the entire time. And then you wouldn't know there was a bass guitar if there wasn't a bass drum that occasionally played every once in a while. And then at the end got really fast. That's it's funny to think about this as like more intelligent music, but it's more intelligent music in the genre that it is.
Yeah, which is
in.
The barrier is very low.
Yeah, boy. If you read The Room at the time, you would understand.
Yeah, like this is not. It's like when you were saying that there was like the punk stuff at the time was probably closer to.
What's extremely important and funny to remember is that American football came out with their best album, most well regarded, in '99. And that changed.
Yeah.
The genre like a decade later.
And that's the thing, right? Is like, I feel like this was the kind of like legacy of that first wave of emo playing in the pop punk space, as opposed to, I don't know. I mean, Hawthorne Heights was decent, but many bands of their ilk, like I Wrestled a Bear Once, or the Number 12 Looks Like You, or Attack to a lesser degree because they were more of a synth rock band, but like, I mean, just not operating in the same.
We gotta actually name some things. You just threw out whatever. Spotify says Census Fail from First to Last, Aiden, The Used, Silverstein, Thursday.
Aiden is a great
Seosin,
example.
That was a weird band.
Story of the Year, Chiodos, Under Oath.
Seosin just came out with it, and Under Oath keep coming out
there
with
we go.
albums.
All right, there we go. We got some names in there. These are all bands that were relevant.
I would say put this up against the Chiodos and see which one has aged better, and I think you'll probably know.
It'll be obvious.
Oh no!
It'll be very obvious to you. Yeah, I was definitely listening to Chiodos this week, and I was like, whoa. Wow, that's some rough shit.
Well, speaking of some quote-unquote rough shit, Sean, why don't you go next?
Oh, what a lead. So this week I chose Wings of a Butterfly by him.
Come on and show them your love. Rip out the wings of a butterfly for your soul, my love. Rip out the wings of a butterfly for your soul. This endless mercy mile.
Sean was a bad boy in high school.
Boy.
I was you. Well, you can still hear this today. That I'm kind of more on the metal side of things, less on the ska side.
Yeah. What I really meant to say is that every song I would have picked would have been a Less Than Jake song, and we chose not to bring that up. But
no, I understand. This would
have been true at the time.
Well, you help round this show out. I hear trumpets and I'm like, oh no, this is awful. Put an 8-string guitar on that thing, and I'm like, yeah, here we go. All right. Let's see. I probably saw this song first on VH1 at some point in time. It probably made charts. And then probably about that time, actually I just saw a headline the other day of Bam Margera like having a restraining order put on against him versus his ex-wife or something along those lines. But I think he always had like the heartogram, which is basically just a pentagram with a heart on one side of it, all over his merchandise and stuff. And I think his brother was in CKY.
He was. I'll talk about that later.
Okay. But
all of these acts were connected to the Bam Margera cinematic universe.
Okay. So there's more to come. Let me talk about why I like this song. I thought this album was very, very good. I like the idea of love metal, and I like that this album, I've probably talked about it a couple times, that I really like melodic metal, and I think that this band does really, really good melodic metal, and it's very orchestral. It's above and beyond a lot of thrasher stuff, but it was a good entryway for me to kind of get into other heavier things later on that were metal adjacent, that led me into liking some of the harder post-punk stuff, but maybe also set me up for like a Circus Survive kind of post-punk thing, because this is I don't know, I was very much into the emotionally aware metal. I don't know if that's is there a Spotify playlist called emotionally aware metal? If not, we should have a challenge. Can we put that on the challenge board? Emotionally aware metal song. Okay. But I liked it. I liked the guitar tones. I thought the singing was really nice. It had this dystopian like world thing. Everybody wears black, and there's all kinds of weird instruments and things like that happening in the video. I just thought it was a wonderful song. It gets stuck in my head all the time. I listened to it going to work this week as I was trying to remember some songs that were, good in the time, and I thought, I could put AFI on here, something along those lines, but then when I talk about him, I still think it holds up. It's not amazing. It's not going to be like change your life song, but I think this whole album holds up as a cool metal concept.
So him was scary as a young teenager, especially a teenager who grew up religious. My parents would not let me listen to him. My parents did not like Bam Margera or Jackass or any of the related things. Yeah, and so when Bam Margera like basically said publicly that him is my favorite band and tattooed the heartogram on himself and made it like his de facto logo, even though it was the band's logo, it all just kind of like tied into this like web of forbidden things where I was like, I'm not allowed to like any of this, and I like all of this. It was like the stupidest form of teenage rebellion. I remember going to a friend's house, getting his copy of this album, I think it was called Dark Light.
Yep.
And riding my bike with it home, like under my shirt, burning myself a copy, and then biking it back to his house because it couldn't be in my home. My parents could not know. So like this album also has a lot of sentimental meaning for me. But you're right. I think it holds up really well. I think it has a really like charismatic delivery. Vil Vallo, the frontman of him, has always been just a really unique character in the scene. And this is him at his like campiest on this album. This is like their attempt at making a pop album, and it comes across as pure camp, and I love it. I mean, there's like 3 power ballads on this record.
Oh yeah, that's why I think it's so good. It's because it's written to be listened to. It's not
it is.
it's a listener's album.
It's like metal that your girlfriend could like.
Yeah.
Which is a very gendered and stereotypical thing to say, but that's kind of how it felt at the time. Remember, this was 2007. Like, I mean, it just felt so dark and scary and weird, and now you look back on it and you're like, it's just kind of a dark love song. Like, it sounds like a heavier version of The Cure. It's not, it's not terrifying. It's actually really good. And it's got a Tim Burton-y music video.
Yeah, it does.
But boy, yeah, this would have been a big heartogram signal in the sky on your MySpace profile saying, I'm edgy.
Right, exactly. I have feelings and I don't like it, my parents.
It's kind of funny that y'all are kind of like, oh, this is like some heavy stuff. But like this is like some dark stuff.
It's not that it was heavy. It's that the the pseudo-satanic imagery.
Oh yeah, the imagery
made it forbidden. I mean, him stood for his infernal majesty.
Right.
They knew what they were doing.
I mean, I definitely felt like there was definitely times, I feel like definitely during this time I was sort of in and out of the church. But even still, like, my parents didn't really care what I listened to. They're like, whatever. Humorously, again, another story I probably told on the show, that I did ask my mom to take me to FYE so I could buy Rage Against the Machine, thus immediately realizing that the machine was the government upon the first song of that album when we put it in the car. But, I had a cool mom. So, that was a... Yeah.
I'm not like the other moms. I'm a cool mom.
You did
but I mean, I don't know. I was kind of like, I kind of already was like flirting with like Linkin Park and like Godsmack and Seether, and like there's definitely was like, I kind of was in the more of like the rock space, although despite like my song choice here, I kind of was like flirting with that as well, right? Because like I'm flipping through, I'm like looking at like what came out in like 2006. Like I definitely got gifted 10,000 Days, like for sure. I definitely was listening to the song that My Curse, or the album that My Curse came out that year. Through the Fire and the Flames was out. Like we were playing Guitar Hero 2 at the time. And so like, like I'm thinking about like a lot of the sort of like the songs there at the time. It's like him, I feel like my perception of him feels a little different from y'all's, in that I felt like, I thought it was like super cheesy. I was like, and I thought that was kind of dumb. I was like, because I have never listened to this album. Never. Not once. I have no idea what him sounds like aside from this one song. But I think that's like the curve, right? Where it's like, you're like, oh, this song isn't, or this band isn't like, they're him is kind of like Ghost, in that it's just like, it's like, ooh, we're scary, but it's just it's just new wave.
It's just new wave.
So like I feel like at the time I was like, oh, this is dumb because it's kind of goofy and like it's like a little melodramatic. But I think at this point in my life, I'm like, oh, him is cool because they understand exactly what they're doing, and it's melodramatic on purpose with that exact intention. Because if you compare this to like all these other artists I literally just named, like the intensity of metal and rock was already at a pretty high, like Avenged Sevenfold, as most intense band to listen to, was already out doing their thing. Like there was like death metal was already sort of like on our doorsteps, right? So like, it's kind of like if you're a kid that's like trying to go for the hardest of hard, you're like, well, if I've already plunged into the depths, this is nothing, But
yeah, I mean, you could even say that Slipknot was heavier than this, but similarly, like, committed to a bit and an aesthetic.
But that being said, cool and sick because of like it is literally the exact same reason why I like Ghost, where it's just so on the nose, and you're right, it's symphonic and the vocal performance is great. It's like there's a real aura that just comes out of the song. There's like an aesthetic, and I feel like that's really good for like a MySpace profile song, where it's like you can create like a world with that. Whereas I feel like I don't know. I feel like some songs just have like a tactility to them that you can feel them. Like I also distinctly remember Taylor at one point had songs from Pretty Odd as his profile songs, and that album was just dripping with like that sort of like that flavor. You could create a whole like aesthetic through that on your profile. I forgot we were talking about MySpace. I was too busy going to the depths of elitism. Great picture.
Listen, we don't need to remember my Pretty Odd era. It was rough. Just like Panic at the Disco doesn't need to remember it either. Oh wait, they don't exist.
Oh!
Speaking of times gone by, my pick for my profile song was Soul Meets Body by Death Cab for Cutie.
Feel what it's like to be new. 'Cause in my head there's a Greyhound station where I set my thoughts to far off destinations, so they may have a chance of finding a place where they're far more suited than here.
I don't think any band was on as many MySpace profiles as Death Cab for Cutie. I would love to see stats on that, but I feel like that has to be true. This was off the lead single off of Death Cab's fifth album, Plans, came out in August of 2005. Produced by bassist Chris Walla. Won a Grammy Award for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or a Group with Vocals. I say all of this to say, this is the big crossover moment for Death Cab for Cutie that coincided with the MySpace explosion. This album is I Will Follow You Into the Dark. It is Soul Meets Body. To a lesser extent, Crooked Teeth. This album was massive. But at the time, there weren't that many kids in our high school who would openly admit to listening to Death Cab for Cutie, and it was almost exclusively our friends. So putting a Death Cab song on your profile said something about you in the suburbs of Cincinnati, Ohio. It said that you were sad and twee, and that you probably wore black Converse, Chuck Taylor All-Star high tops, and you knew who Zooey Deschanel was, and you had skinny jeans, if your parents let you, and you had gauged ears, if your parents let you. Like, this was that aesthetic. Looking back on it now, I still think this is probably Death Cab's best album. I think there's something about the production of this album, probably because it's a member of the band doing it. It's just so pristine. You can hear the contributions of every member of the band. They feel like such a tight unit. And the cohesion of the vocal with the instrumentals is just so perfect on this song. It has these cool shifts and chord changes that feel really dramatic, feel really cathartic when you're 14 years old. Like, I don't know. It was just what I wanted music to do and be at the time. And to a certain extent still is. It's a melancholy pop song. You know I love them. And if I could have a profile song today, I might pick this song anyway, because it's just so dang good. It's a great track. Also, Ben Gibbard looks like a baby in this music video. I mean, it's been almost 20 years, but still.
This is definitely one of those driving fast, sad songs. This is like a fresh listen for me. I know of this song, and I think I like this song, and it's not something I actively seek out, but I feel like when you talk about it and when I listen to it, it kind of reminds me of the pleasure that I get in listening to Father John Misty. It's kind of an updated version of this where it's sort of like happy music for sad people, or it's sad music for happy people. And I appreciate that about it. I see its place now. At the time, this wouldn't have had enough metal and guitars for me, and it wouldn't have been edgy enough. I think I was just in a different place in my life when this came out. But upon listening to it this week, I felt a lot more attracted to the idea. And the thing is, I think when you talk to a millennial about Death Cab for Cutie, they were kind of a prolific band. It wasn't like I think there's a lot of people that were aware of this band, even if they weren't aware of it, and this song might have been the song that they were aware of it with.
Yeah, it was either this or I Will Follow You Into the Dark.
Yeah,
so
that
good.
might be number one.
It's just too hacky for me. That's the only song on this album that I don't think is held up.
Whoa, really? Wow.
Damn.
Come at me.
Their number one song, and you say, mid. I'll follow you, like, just
It is mid.
Oh, no, wait, hold on. I Will Possess Your Heart. That's their number one. It's not off this album.
It's on the next one.
I will say,
Yes.
I Will Possess Your Heart is
I feel
also
like
a great
Narrow
track.
Stairs. That's a strong one too. I feel like after that, I just stopped caring. That is until Foxglove Through the Clear Cut, one singular song off their newest album, which somehow rivals all of that because it's a post-rock song. Anyway, how do I feel about Soul Meets Body? I have to recall what was happening at the time. I feel like this was a song that was used for a lot of relationships.
Lots of couples. Soul Meets Body was our song.
I feel like I have always appreciated Death Cab for Cutie, but I don't know. I feel like there was such a oversaturation of it just in our local cluster that I never felt that compelled to like listen to it, especially with like some of like the baggage associated with it. But I mean, you like listen to this now and it's like it feels like it fits so much in with like I'm like thinking about it now and it's like I felt like at the time how do I actually feel? Is music more spread out now or back then? I don't know. I feel like there was a time when the diversity in the rock space was much larger, and I feel like that was during this time where I feel like they were breaching more into like the mainstream. I feel like rock as a genre right now currently doesn't necessarily like exist in like sort of like our popular sort of like culture aside from specific groups and stuff like that. So it may just be my perception of it just because we were in it at the time. Because like if I'm also looking at like top songs from these years, it's, you know, they're not exactly like topping either. Was I just with a group of people that really love this band? I think so. I think we were just used really, really into Death Cab for Cutie. But that being said, I mean, obviously great song. I mean, you don't need to tell me that. Yeah, great, lovely song.
Oh, God, I have a lot to talk about in Billy Joe Armstrong, so I'll have to get to that. Which is our Patreon subscriber podcast. We're going to record that right after this. So if you're interested in hearing it for $1 a month, every month you get an additional bonus podcast that's unedited. Basically just straight up content where we review the songs, talk about new ones, give you little helpful hints, behind the scene notes, all kinds of stuff.
Probably talk about high school during that one.
Yeah.
Based on this
You're probably
conversation.
gonna get to see me have some like really deep cathartic moment about how I feel about watching the video of I Will Possess Your Heart on that show in about 10 minutes. So, you know,
Woo-wee.
it's worth $1. And but with that, so with that, it's time for listener suggestions, and these were songs that were submitted by everybody via various social media platforms and all kinds of different stuff. And we thank you for this big one this week. So this is just going to be a long episode. I feel like we just really had some good deep content to get in here. But let's go ahead and start. So 227 MySpace profile. Terrible pun name picked I'm Not Okay by My Chemical Romance.
Classic. But a little too
clapping
obvious.
for that.
Like everyone's gonna be picking that.
Bridget _ la 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 picked Cute Without an E by Taking Back Sunday.
Also
oh, God,
excellent.
I feel so seen right now. Hecked Up picked Dr. Worm by They Might Be Giants. Oh, God. Yeah. Rory Snake picked The Middle by Jimmy Eat World. That probably took some time.
That music video made me so uncomfortable as a budding queer kid because it's just a bunch of people at a pool party in white underwear. And I was like, I feel things and I don't understand why.
For everyone.
Julia and Seth picked They Perch on Their Stilts, Pointing and Daring You to Break Custom by Sayason. Wow, that
is a 2005 ass song title.
Step aside, Panic.
Yeah. All right, so... Oh, man, I'm really going to butcher this handle, so...
Halfill.
Okay, they picked Make Damn Sure, Everything Is Alright, Ohio Is for Lovers, and Jane Fonda, which are all songs associated with different bands.
All great. All good.
But, yeah, all great. 71 DPI picked I Think Patrick Swayze Is Sexy by Kane Hodler.
Alex said that
I'm familiar with that one.
The site went down, or the last song that he put on there, and that was it. And he said I think it was perfect. So
that was it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Fair enough.
Okay, and Brandon I might have added an extra "and" or removed an extra "and" from that one, so don't try and spell that out. Picked "We're From Barcelona" by I'm From Barcelona.
I think it's a ska band. I looked at their Spotify profile and there was a tuba. So I'm like, well.
Okay.
You might give it a listen.
That would be one of those indie picks. So with that, it's our turn for B-sides, and these are songs that were so close to getting picked, but well, they might have been on Facebook at some time. They just weren't number one. We're talking about years of music. You had to pick one. So
and you changed your song
B-sides.
every week.
Well, yeah, you got to keep it fresh. Got to keep those clicks coming in.
Many of my B-sides have already been said, so I'm not going to say them again. But I have a couple ones that weren't mentioned. Here It Goes Again by OK Go,
Treadmill
which
song.
Tyler mentioned recently. Snow Hey-O by Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Unfortunate.
Hey, Stadium Arcadium is a great record. Perfect Situation by Weezer, the only good song off of Make Believe. Don't at me. And then I've picked it before on the show, but We Are Rock Stars by Does It Offend You? Yeah. They were a MySpace discovery for me. Love that band. And then Sean talked about this earlier with Bam Margera and him. Bam Margera's brother was the bassist in the band CKY, which was also very scary because the name was an acronym for self-harm. But their song 96 Quite Bitter Beings is a bop and has an iconic guitar riff and was my MySpace profile song for a while. I distinctly remember putting it on there and feeling very hardcore.
All right. The Suffering, Coheed Cambria, is the first song when I realized that my parents and I didn't have the same taste. My Favorite Accident by Motion City Soundtrack. Needs no explanation. Alive with the Glory of Love by Say Anything. We're not going to talk about the other song from that album that I do not like and I hate very much about masturbation. At Your Funeral by Saves the Day. White Unicorn by Wolfmother. Strength of the World by Avenged Sevenfold. And We All Return to Our Roots by The Forecast. Stick Stickly by Attack Attack. And You Are Familiar by Secret or Whisper. all great bands that you should listen to, probably.
Let's see. I was gonna say I probably had a lot of Muse on there at first. Something off Absolution. Taking Back Sunday. I was listening to some of them this week. Probably Operator Air. If I could go back and pick a song, there'd probably be one that would be on there a lot. I probably had Ocean Avenue on there at some point in time in early MySpace days.
Also a bop.
I'm trying to think I listened to a lot of Sugar Cult this week.
Ooh.
I was like, oh yeah, that's right. My freshman and sophomore year of marching
The dying days of butt rock.
Yeah, a lot of the older guys were into that California rock stuff, and so that played a pretty big presence on me. I almost probably my quick B-side would be She's the Blade by Sugar Cult. It just kind of wins out over that. I'm trying to think like if there was anything else. There's probably like lots of like thrash metal stuff that was on there. Probably a band that no one's ever heard of and no longer exists out there is called Some Girls. They did like fast post-punk stuff. And then probably Circa was on there a little bit, but all these bands are... Spotify told me this week that I don't really listen to bands 1 or 2 albums. I listen to like everything that they have for a long time, and that's right. So for me to just pick one song would be not doing them justice. So,
Well, Tyler, if people want to add you to their top 8, where can they find you?
Hey everybody, you can find my design illustration work at rudepets.club. As always, you can find me on socials as Rude Pets Club on Instagram and Twitter.
Sean, if people want to send you pick for pick, where can they do that?
they can find me on Instagram at TellySean.
If you want to leave a comment on my profile, you can find me on the socials at TC Olmstead. All of these songs will be on the official No Repeat podcast playlist. We'll be back in a few minutes with our Patreon exclusive bonus podcast, Billy J. Armstrong's Middle School Notebook. But if you're not a patron, we'll see you next week with another free episode of No Repeat.